This is the Long Haul Pedalcast with John McGavick and Steve Schools. Incredible stories of endurance coming from the prairies. Be inspired to create your own long haul journey. Welcome back to the Long Haul Pedalcast. In part 2 with Paolo Saldahna, Paolo shares his journey with Canadian legend Mike Woods, the only human on earth to run a sub 4-minute mile and win a Tour de France stage. Those remarkable results don't reflect the gut-wrenching journey in between and the part Paolo played in the most unlikely combination of sporting accomplishments you will ever hear. And if Mike Woods is listening to this podcast, we'd love to hear your side of the story. But for now, let's join Paolo as he talks about this incredible journey.
As Power Watch starts to take off and you start to bring that element into Premier Studio, and that becomes the center point, I think, for Premier Studio, is training these fitness executives. Two important people come into your life that set you on this next chapter. That'd be Michael Woods and Sylvan Adams. And so maybe this is a point where we go down that path and say,
sure.
How did, with Power Watch as the catalyst, how did that next chapter start with you as one of the premier performance coaches in Canada?
Yeah, so I think the first part is that you get to meet a lot of successful people when you have a program that's designed to get the most out of yourself, that attracts successful people or motivated people at least. And one of those people was an individual by the name of Sylvan Adams. And Sylvan Adams was a real estate developer in Montreal. And he had a bunch of friends who had come to see me the year previous and had started the spring way ahead of him. So, of course, he came to see me. And, we got him involved in indoor training. And I saw that he had, I would say, a world-class mind in terms of resilience and drive and passion. And I've worked with a lot of athletes, so that says a lot. When I say somebody has a world-class mind, he may not have had an 80 VO2 max, but between the 2 ears, I was impressed. So I encouraged him to get involved in cycling. And he didn't even know that bicycle racing existed. I mean, he was 40 years old. He was a real estate developer. And he came in and started training, and I got to know him, got him involved in a training camp. He came to do a training camp with us. Then I got to encourage him to do bike racing. He started doing bike racing. He has become multiple-time world masters champion in cycling, both on road and on the track.
Oh, wow.
So very accomplished guy who started again late and who didn't have any experience in this type of sport. So it shows you can progress quite a bit with the right kind of guidance and the right mind, and he was made for bike racing. Bike racing is a war. It's a war. And this guy could take bullets. He knows how to bob and weave and dive, and he just never give up. There's no give up. He doesn't have the give up gene. And that's what you got to have, is no give up gene. So he trained with me for a number of years, and I actually met Mike Woods after I worked with Sylvan, but it was during the same time as I was still working with Sylvan. And Sylvan became involved in a project called Spider Tech, which is a Steve Bauer endeavor of a professional cycling team operating out of Canada, and also sponsored by Spider Tech Tape, which is a Ray Abersman, the owner of that. So Sylvan became involved in that. And as part of that, I sort of became the performance testing guy and coach for some of the Spider Tech riders. I was brought in by Ray, introduced to Steve that way. And it's through that I actually met Mike Woods. Now, how did I meet Mike Woods? It's not that he rode for Spider Tech. I met Mike Woods because I did a training camp for the Spider Tech guys in the eastern townships of Quebec. And I was doing motor pacing with them and all kinds of things like that because they were preparing for some races. And a few of them went to Ottawa to do a bike race. I think it was called the Ottawa Grand Prix or something. And one of the riders came back after that race, back to the camp, and told me, he says, there's this guy, Paulo. We were all there. We're elite riders. We're all there. And this guy looked like he was riding his grandfather's bike. And we couldn't drop him. We just couldn't drop the guy. On the hills, he didn't know what to do anything on the turns. We would drop him on the turns, but then as soon as the hills would come in, he'd be right on our wheel again. We couldn't get rid of the guy. I'm like, oh, really? What was his name? And they said, Michael Woods. I'm like, Michael Woods? I never heard of him. He's not a bike racer. He's going, no, but he's got lungs like this. And well, I said, did you get his information? Maybe we'll invite him to the camp. And the camp was ending. So we had another one in about a month or something. So I said, get his info. We'll invite him to the camp. So we invited him to the camp. And so I knew nothing about Mike. No history, no nothing at all. I invited him to the camp. And at the camp, first day, okay, Mike, here's what we're going to do. We're going to ride to Mount Sutton, which is about a 6-kilometer climb. We ride an hour before we get there. And we get there, and I'm on my motorcycle, and we're 8 or 10 Spider Tech guys and Mike Wood. And I said, okay, guys, here's what we're doing. We're going to go tempo to tempo hard up this climb for the first part, and then it's full gas on the second part of the climb. And the tricky part here is you're not all going together. We're going 40 seconds apart, each one of you. And Mike, you're going last, and I'm going to follow you on my moto. All you guys will go 40 seconds at a time. So I'm sending them off 40 seconds at a time. And there's like 6 minutes difference between the first guy and Mike, you know. I get in behind Mike on my moto. He takes off like a bat out of hell. And I have my head units on there, and I'm connected to his power meter, so I know exactly what he's doing. I'm behind him, and I see this guy 30 seconds in to this effort of 15 minutes holding over 400 watts. Not a cyclist, holding over 400 watts. He's 65 kilos, 66 kilos. And I'm laughing, saying to myself, there's 0% chance that this guy will hold this number.
Yeah.
0% chance.
Which actually, just very briefly, sounds a lot like David Montgomery talking about you,
There
you know,
you go.
25
There you
years
go.
earlier. Yes.
Well,
Yeah. Because it's just,
Now-
it's a shocker. Yeah.
Full circle.
Yeah, it's a shocker. And sure enough, he catches every single Spider Tech guy, every single one.
Wow.
And that's a pro
Breaks.
cycling team in Canada. Yes.
Yeah, and breaks the record of a guy who I used to coach by the name of Steve Rover, who was national champion, who
Yep.
also raced professionally in
Yep.
Europe.
Yep.
He breaks the record that Steve had set when I was doing that test with him a few years earlier.
What climb was this? What climb? What hill?
Mount Sutton. So you start in Sutton and you
Okay.
go to the very top. And so I get to the top and I'm just shaking my head saying, he's going to crack. He's going to crack. Nope, he doesn't crack. And he catches everybody, gets to the top. I stop the motorcycle. I go to the side. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Does it sound familiar?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
What are you doing? Okay. Comes full circle, guys. Life
Yeah.
is a cycle.
You're wasting your talent.
I said, you need to quit your job, whatever it is you do. You need to become, in 1 year, you can learn the skills, you'll be a pro bike racer. He says, come on, Paulo. He says, how am I going to pay my rent? I work in a bank. You know, he was working in a bank. He hated math and adding numbers. He hated it. He was so sad working in a bank. And he also worked, I think, in a bike shop. And I said, don't worry, let me take care of that. So ride back, go to my place. And I had found one of the rarest talents that I'd ever come across in my life. He was so much more talented than I was. So much more talented. Because here's a guy who used to be a sub 4-minute miler, recruited to the University of Michigan, full ride, full scholarship. And as they do often in NCAA, you know, they grind you to the ground. You know, it's either you survive and succeed or you get injured and you're done. And that's what they did with Mike. They injured him to the point where he had 3 stress fractures eventually in his foot, the last one developing avascular necrosis, and they had to put a pin in it, and that put a pin in his career. So all of his lifelong dreams of being an Olympic runner were destroyed. And I will say this, there is no one more motivated than an athlete who has lost everything. And that's Mike Woods personified. And when he did that climb on that bike, that guy was driven by having lost everything. No safety net, working in a bank in a bike shop. And I saw that. I felt it. It was palpable. And when I came back to him, I basically listened to how I tied it together. I said, Mike, you're going to quit your job. We'll figure out, I'm not going to charge you. I'm going to coach you for free. And I'm going to get somebody to cover the expenses. And so he goes back, tells his girlfriend that this is potentially something that could happen. I get on the blower to my very successful real estate friend, Sylvan Adams, who had told me, you know, Paulo, you have a good eye for talent. If you ever find somebody from Canada who's really talented, you call me up. Maybe I'll help.
Wow.
I said, Sylvan, I found him. He says, What do you need? I said, well, I need a check for $30,000. That's going to cover his living expenses, his training expenses, and we'll see where this takes him. He goes, tomorrow, come to my office. Here's the check. Boom. Mike Woods, fully supported by Sylvan Adams. I found this talent. Sylvan supported it. And he did that for 2 years, not just one, year to year, until Mike was able to sign a professional contract and eventually end up on our team.
Right.
Where, it was great because it felt like he was coming home. But that's the long story of Mike Woods. And it was a challenging one because Mike knew nothing about bike racing. Mike was a crash test dummy on the bike, banging into guys and crashing. But the engine was incredible, and his mind, he has a performance mindset, and his mind has been, it's been developed by having everything taken away from him. He takes nothing for granted anymore. And that is such a powerful energy for athletes. If you can find a talent who has that in his head, there's your winning combination.
So when you say he had everything taken away from him, I think he's lost his identity as a supreme athlete. But what does that mean to you, or what does that mean to Mike when you say he had everything taken away from him?
So his dreams, what he wanted to accomplish, how he defined himself. In fact, so much so that there were kind of legacy emotions from that he had to overcome in his transition to becoming a cyclist. He had the imposter syndrome. He says, I don't belong here. I don't deserve to be here. Well, guess what, Mike? You do. You've got a 91 VO2 max, and you can hold 425 watts for 20 minutes. You belong here, man. You just need to evolve the skill piece, And it took a lot of nurturing, but he had the basic qualities: resilience, motivation, a little bit of confidence, not fearing failure, willing to go into the unknown. Imagine reinventing yourself. The guy was working in a bank. He had given up on his dreams as being an athlete. It was over. To dive into this, I facilitated it, but he had to make that decision, And it's not easy to make for everyone when your dreams have been crushed.
Mm-hmm. And just to add a little bit to that, Mike Woods, I knew about Mike Woods when he was a runner simply because every running coach I knew talked about Mike Woods as the future of Canadian men's running, that he was the guy that was going to win that world championship medal, win that Olympic medal in running, in distance running for Canada, which, no one basically had done anything like that on the men's side. And that's what I was hearing this story about this Mike Woods. So he's got this situation where, the hopes and dreams of a lot of people are almost on him, and have all of that shattered with these injuries. And he does this one ride that you watch, and it sounds like what you're describing is, as soon as that ride finished, you went to talk to him. Like, it wasn't like you thought about it. Like, instantaneously from all your experience, you see this is something truly extraordinarily unique, what you're watching here. And that's, obviously, ultimately he gets to winning a stage of the Tour de France, all that, but there is still so much that happens like that. I'm guessing that's like maybe 2011 time frame. So that's where Mike Woods is. That's, where you are. Sylvan Adams comes in to support him, but maybe take us through your journey with Mike. Some of it was as a personal coach, some of it was maybe a little bit back when he was with a different team, but ultimately he's going from that point to, challenging for stage wins in the Tour of Spain and so forth, and then that World Championship race in 2018. Take us through some of those steps, because like you've said many times, success is very, very jagged, and there's a lot that he had to go through just to make those further advances. So take us through some of that.
Yeah, I remember I used to log his crashes, and I think he went from like 18 crashes a season to 2 or 3 crashes a season, but it took 4 years. There's a cost to that. Those were challenging times.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
As an example, he raced in the Rio Olympics with a fractured leg that we didn't even know.
Oh, wow.
That's why he underperformed there, So there were a lot of ups and downs, even including in the Tokyo Olympics. For me, was a failure because I think he played it wrong. I think he, instead of trying to go to win, he was conservative in his mindset to accept that he's going to be okay with an actual podium or medal. So when you view things that way, you race differently. And I think that hurt him to be out of the medals in that small group of 5 guys that were left or so. The first thing with Mike, the biggest lesson or the biggest learning that I got from working with this diamond, and he was a diamond, I pulled him out of the earth, but I saw pretty quickly it just needs a little polishing. This is a big diamond. Some athletes, you pull coal out and you put it under pressure over a number of years and eventually get a little diamond out of it. But Mike was a diamond. That's an easy pick. The first thing was I tried not to boil the ocean. You know what I mean? Like we got to go to what we think is the most critical component for this guy to succeed. And that meant looking at all of his gaps, defining whether they're big enough gaps to limit him, but also looking at his strengths and seeing how hard could we hit these strengths in a way that can make them even better. And the strategy I took was, I'm going to touch on his weaknesses a little bit. Racing will take care of that to some degree, but from a power optimization perspective, I can only get so much at his age in this area, but I can get more at where he's really strong. And so I put the hammer down hard on that. So I didn't try to boil the ocean in the sense that I try to do everything, because you get excited as a coach. You go, wow, I'm going to do this, that, and that. And then you kind of really don't have him rise to the level that you think he could, because you're trying to impact too many things. And so simplification was important with this guy. And it worked, because I knew that steep climbs, anything above 12%, 4 to 8 minutes long, with selective groups. In other words, not with groups of 100, but smaller groups that have been whittled away, because he's got good fatigue resistance or durability, as they call it. If we can optimize that, and if this grade is so steep that you have to stand, all of a sudden that VO2 kicks in and all the other guys are going to be falling behind. And that's exactly what happened. We got him prepped for a couple of races, Tour Down Under being one of them, where he did really, really well in Wollonga. And that kind of catapulted him into legitimacy and opened eyes. Like I prepped him for Tour Down Under as if it was the Tour de France. Optimized, peaking, blah, 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 all the important things. I said, you're going to go there and you're going to open eyes to the point where you're going to get a World Tour team that's going to come after you. And it worked, and that's exactly what happened. That's how he kind of started his career. But, the key thing there was not overdoing it, focusing on what he's good at, maybe touching a little bit on what he's not so good at. And really, that was the formula for success. And it's different for every athlete, obviously, If it was somebody that's a little bit more slow maturing, a little bit more of a piece of coal, it would be a different approach. You have to do many foundational layers to that. But with Mike, big engine, we just had to convert over some of the musculature to cycling rather than running, and it got the job done.
Now, one question there. When he goes to a pro team like EF Education, are you still working with him, or is he working with his own coaches with that team, or how was that playing out?
Mike's the only coach I ever had. Now, I'm the only coach Mike's ever had. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah. I think that typically what ends up happening is when you sign for a World Tour team, they take over all the coaching. But Mike put it in his contract to have me be the coach. And what I said is, look, if you're not getting the progress that you want, I'm okay. Let's, hand it off, because I only cared about him reaching his potential. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about my ego. It wasn't about that at all. In fact, I always say this to our coaches on our team, is that there's a conflict between coaching an athlete and your own ambitions. And that conflict is that, at least with me, it used to be an inner conflict. It's not anymore. Your goal as a coach, if you're a good one, is to make yourself obsolete, to make yourself not needed. And the reason for that is because when I started with Mike, he needed to know so many different things across a wide swath. And he became more and more informed, more intelligent, more experienced. And the more he got there, the less he needed me. And the poor coaches are the ones who hang on for dear life, holding back that athlete. You need me, you need me, you need me. And they become these enablers and form this relationship with an athlete that makes it so that they need you. You should be the opposite. You should let them fly. And it's quite exceptional for an athlete like Mike at his level to have one coach. It's an exception.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I let him go. And in the last 4 years of coaching Mike, it was consultation. It's like, Mike, I think this periodization might work best. What do you think? Paulo, what about this? Let's add that. And it became like we added the pieces together. And he would make changes. He would call audibles, and so would I. And I would ask him questions. Okay, have you tried this? What do you think about that? Yeah, I agree with that, but maybe not this. And that's how it should be when you're coaching an athlete at such a high level. Yet coaches, and if there are coaches listening to this, resist the temptation to make it about you. Make it about the athlete. And if you can give that athlete such a long leash that they can succeed, then there'll always be a leash that connects you to them. It just won't be too close, you know? So yeah, that's my experience with Mike and the coaching piece of it.
That is incredible. And one of the most exciting moments for me as a Canadian cycling fan was 2023, Puy de Dôme.
Yeah.
Where were you? Can you tell us your experience there?
So that's a crazy story. You're never going to believe it when I tell you. But I was at the tour. I was with the team. And we were staying in typical crappy French hotels, 1-2-star hotels that have terrible food and no air conditioning. And this is the environment the guys operate in the Tour de France, because they have to put up all these people. And so what happened, of course, is I went out the night before for dinner with the team, and I got food poisoning.
Oh
no.
The next day was Puy de Dôme, and I got food poisoning. I got food poisoning so bad that I could not, every orifice was active. And fever, gastroenteritis, the doctors were concerned. They came to see me that morning. We had to leave to the start of the race, and we were going to another hotel afterwards. And I'm in bed in the dark saying, leave me here. I can't move. Anyway, team leaves, no vehicle, no nothing. I'm just by myself in a hotel room in the dark, no bags, just my knapsack. And I drag myself out of bed at noon because I had heard the race starting, and I found a way to get on a bus.
No way.
And I got on a bus, and I can't remember the name of the town that the bus went to, but it was the town where the team was staying. And I'm on the bus.
So you're not on the team bus. You're on a public bus,
regular bus,
like a Greyhound.
They're all gone.
They're all gone. And you're just totally wasted from this.
I have my phone in one hand with a live feed.
No way.
And a vomit bag in the other. And I'm watching the race because I also get motion sick on buses.
Oh, no.
Not the best. So I'm throwing up as I'm watching the race. And as I get closer to the town we were at, and we're 3 hours in or whatever, I'm seeing that Mike's in a move that could potentially be in the winning situation. And so I get dropped off by the bus at the bus station, but the bus station is 8 kilometers away from where the team is staying. It's 15 kilometers away from the finish line. And there's no way I'm going to make it. They're on the last climb. There's no way I'm going to make it to the finish line to be there with Mike. So I watched the finish on a park bench just outside the bus station.
Wow.
In a small French town.
Wow.
Watching Mike win at Puy de Dôme. Oh, what a heartbreaker, but I was extremely happy for him. It was a great win. And I was screaming at the phone,
Yes.
By then, I had so much adrenaline in me that everything disappeared, and it was great. I had dinner with him that night, and it was a fantastic win. But I wish I had something more glorious to tell you guys as a story.
That's amazing.
But that's how it ended.
But that is a great story, and just trying to, you've coached this athlete, you've worked with this athlete, and wins the stage of the tour. And for those that haven't seen that stage, he had to catch Matteo Jorgensen. Yeah. And I remember I was watching that live, and the commentators are not really noticing yet that Mike is closing that gap. And I literally had a stopwatch screaming, like I'm trying to do the time gaps, and I can see he's closing the time gaps. I'm like, there's a possibility here, and just so dramatic that he ended up taking, take the win on the top of Puy de Dôme. And yeah, I was always wondering what you were thinking as you're watching this, and you're just trying to not throw up as you're watching this.
Yeah. Well, by the time I was on the park bench with it, he was partway up there, and I had calculated, because, again, the strengths are over 12% grade, where everybody needs to kind of stand, and when you can't stand as a bigger guy, Matteo would probably be compromised
Yes.
there, whereas Mike could stand, and he could stand for a super long time, and I knew the conditions were prime. The only thing I didn't know is would we have enough runway to catch him, and we did. It was long enough that he could actually take advantage of it. It was a fantastic win. I'll never forget it, and I have a signed jersey of him in my basement for that stage, and it was fantastic.
Wow. One other race. I mean, I watched a lot of Mike Woods races over the years, but the World Championships in 2018 in Austria, and for the whole year, they're talking about the men's race is going to have this really steep 19% climb. And, it's Mike Woods maybe talking a little bit about, preparing for that race. But obviously behind the scenes, you guys are thinking this is his kind of climb. And,
100%.
It's really steep, but it's at the end of a 7-hour race, right? Like a lot of things have to happen to get to that point. And I remember watching that myself, and I'm screaming at the TV as he goes to the front on that climb. And just one by one, these top riders can't stay with them. And I'm like, is this really happening? Ultimately he went on to win a bronze medal, but maybe take us through, like, I don't know, like not only that race, but his preparation. Like you see this course and, you mentioned about the Tour Down Under where they have the Wollonga Hill. It's known as a really steep, long climb or, that kind of climb. How are you preparing? How are you thinking about this? And then what are you going through when you're watching that race?
Yeah, so obviously you have to build the guy's durability with a lot of endurance-based training, but in those endurance-based training, you do a lot of sustained aerobic tempo work with spikes, like a lot of that. And some of it's torque-based, some of it's speed-based. But I could get into details. We could spend a whole podcast on the preparation of Mike Woods for that particular race. But there was a lot of that. But the most important thing, the thing that cemented the performance, and by the way, he's still very disappointed he didn't win that race. He thinks he could have won it.
Right,
And I think
right.
he could have won it too.
Sure.
I think he cramped up a little bit. But the biggest factor that ensured that he was there was the team strategy and the support structure for Mike. So it's, Canadian teams, we're not the most highly ranked country in the world, so you don't get as many slots for world championships. So you're compromised there already. But what we did say was that, Mike, you need to lie on the couch for 4 to 5 hours. You lie on the couch, get on that saddle and lie on the couch.
And what you're meaning, conserve energy, conserve every bit of energy he can.
Nothing.
Yes.
Your teammates are getting fuel for you. You're sitting in, hiding. You're nobody's going to notice you. You're like, I don't want to see you anywhere in the wind. You shouldn't be anywhere in the wind. And the team bought into that. They supported him. And that's part of the reason why he was able to exercise his strength and demonstrate his strength that late into the races, because he hadn't done. Now, obviously, you got to get over the climbs. There were a lot of climbs in that race, but when the peloton's climbing at 5.5 watts per kilo, that's not hard enough for Mike to actually drain him too much. So he's still relatively fresh. So as long as there weren't a lot of 6.5 to 7 watt per kilo efforts, then it would have maybe stung a little bit more, but everybody else would have been stung too. So it was mostly that was the biggest factor that led to the success at Worlds for Mike, in my opinion.
One of the things that I've heard reading a few things, though, is that you and Sylvain have been huge supporters of Canadian cycling. And were you there helping the team at all in 2018?
Yes.
And because when you go into a World Championships as a single rider, you are riding with a team, but you're no longer riding with your pro team. You're riding with the other Canadians. And you're getting different support than what you would get in the Pro Tour. But it must have been really nice to have you there and you guys supporting the team. And I think Canadian cycling probably really appreciated that kind of performance director support that you were giving to the team.
Sure. Yeah, we definitely provided them with all kinds of support, mechanics, some vehicles, a little bit of coaching and performance support, preparation. Chris Rozdilski was also there, who's another coach that I work with as part of our team. And we've supported Cycling Canada with, if they need a team bus to go somewhere in particular key races, we've tried to do that. We've tried to support them as much as possible, and I think that made a difference. I think Kevin Fields made a difference as well, with Cycling Canada, although he's no longer with them. It's always tough, underfunded governing bodies like Cycling Canada. They're underfunded because I think the whole funding structure is broken in Canada to a degree. They really only fund on probability of Olympic medals. And when you look at cycling in general, the statistics demonstrate that in track cycling, that's the highest probability of success. And so they just don't carve out enough for road and other disciplines in the sport. And I think that's probably something that needs to change a little bit if you're going to support cycling in Canada. Oftentimes, it's the sports that don't succeed as much that need the most help. So you need to flip that sometimes a little bit on its head, But I can't blame the government for doing that, because I think they're really focused on winning the most medals for Canada. So
right. So that $5,000 investment that you got as a budding Ironman triathlete, and that comment about you have to give back, I think being generous is in your DNA, Paulo, to be honest, the man that I know. But I think that might have been one of the best $5,000 investments in Canadian cycling ever made, because of all of the amazing things that you've done for Canadian riders and bringing them up through the system and having them join Israel, Premier Tech, Israel Startup Nation, now NSN. It's been amazing.
Yeah, it's been a great ride, that's for sure. You mentioned NSN, that's a whole other whiteboard project, I would say, that Sylvan was involved in getting me into. And I'm super grateful, but also I was very excited about that project because, I'd never really been involved on an operational level, or even to a degree on a big picture performance level in professional cycling. I had been involved in Spider Tech, but it was a much smaller team. My scope was much more limited. This was a whole other story. I mean, being part of upper management and putting down strategic vision and developing pillars for the organization. Those are all really good experiences for me, hiring coaches, nutritionists, doctors, establishing team culture, building processes, automations, analytical tools. These are all things that I've been involved in helping this team, and I love that. That I was made to do. And it's really evolved. I mean, we have had our bumps in the road. There's no doubt about it with the Israel protests and the Vuelta this year, and us being forced to change the name, and Sylvan having to make some changes there. But at the end of the day, it didn't change the DNA and the soul of our team. We're a very performance-driven team. We're a very data-driven team. I think I've played a role in instilling that culture to a degree. We have quite an open, fairly flat organization on our squad, which is, by the way, not very common in the sport. And again, I don't come from professional cycling. I'm not what's called a lifer in that sport.
Right.
I didn't come from Ineos or Sky or all these things, so I don't have a template to follow. And in many ways, that's a blessing, because we pave our own way, and we don't model after another team because that's the way they did it in the past. It's weird, the sport, because in many ways, it's extremely traditional and conservative, yet it's an innovative sport. And those two things often, they either mesh or they conflict.
Clash. Yeah.
We're a very sports science driven team, and because of my role on the team, there's more buy-in to that. But there's still a lot of teams that there's not a lot of buy-in in sports science, especially applied sports science like we need. But I kind of feel like I mentioned to you guys maybe before we started this podcast, that Sylvan basically has thrown me into the candy store. He's locked the door and he says, knock yourself out. And I've been in there for like 7 years, playing around and enjoying myself. And it's a great privilege. I'm very blessed to have experienced it.
Yeah, so amazing, all these stories. And I have a couple of questions just to kind of, one is a quick question and then one to wrap up just talking about your future. But one thing I always feel bad about is the Tour de France is no longer on cable TV in Canada. It's no longer free on YouTube. And it's really narrowed the audience. Like, I remember when Steve Bauer gets the yellow jersey in the 1988 Tour as a kid. And everyone in my small northern Manitoba town is talking about it, asking me about it. 2023, Mike Woods wins a stage on the tour. Hugo Houle wins a stage in the 2022 tour.
Yep.
And it's like, it's just a little bit on the news or a little bit in the newspaper. People aren't talking about it. What is your, I don't know, how do you feel about that? Like, these are incredible Canadian sporting moments, and it's now a really narrow audience that's seeing that. I don't know if you have an opinion on that at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's disappointing. I mean, but there's not a whole lot that can be done about it. I mean, Canada's more of a winter sport country than a summer sport country, although there are sports that are popular. I think it speaks to a bigger problem, and it's not necessarily Canada-centric. I think, professional cycling is not like a professional franchise at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. And the sport is governed in such a way, and I have to be very political in how I say this.
Sure.
The sport is governed in such a way that, if you own a professional cycling team, it's a license to spend a lot of money every year. There's no real revenue line associated to it. And because of that, it attracts a certain kind of support structure that limits the scope of things. There's no sharing of TV rights. There's no salary caps. There's no scouting system and draft system. There's none of that. It's wild, wild west time in professional cycling. And that is part of the reason why you see things like this happening in countries whereas if there was, some type of mechanism for sharing TV rights or revenue control there might be a way to make countries share in that as well, especially if you have superstar athletes that come from those countries. I don't know if they're related, but I'm hoping that as the sport evolves, that we can have more controls in place, more revenue driven to the teams, less strain on the teams' budgets on a yearly basis, and more viewership as a result.
Okay. Yeah. No, very, very well said.
Like Netflix Unchained got a lot of viewers and got a lot of people who don't follow cycling into it. And then again, Netflix dropped it because of whatever reason. So I think there's an appetite there. I think there's the potential there. Someone just needs to pull the right strings.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they're looking at things that can also make the sport a little bit more exciting. Like right now, if I have an iPad, we have the technology where I can see all my riders real time, get their power data live streamed to me instantly. But it's illegal. The UCI has not allowed that to open up yet. But it's looking like they're going to start to do things like that with companies like Velon. So you'll be able to watch a race and see the power data streaming in, and it already is happening a little bit, but they need to unlock that a little bit, and allow the viewers to get excited about how, this guy's got this capability of power and he's going to come to this climb and let's see what happens. You can commentate in a much better way that makes it more interesting for the viewer.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Malcolm Gladwell said the same thing about running. He said, we need the metrics. We need to see people's Strava, and then real time, we need to see physiological data on the athletes to make the stories more compelling in the middle of the race. So, that would be, as a physiologist, I would love it.
And as a commentator, cycling commentator, I would love that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
No kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, that would be great. It would be great. Let's see what happens.
Sure.
Time will tell.
Sure. Okay. So there's so many more things we could talk about, but let's just to finish it off. What is in the future for you? Whether it's just from yourself or from training methods or anything, what do you kind of see as your future? I mean, we've talked about your last 40 years in this sport, but how do you see your future going forward?
Well, I have been working on some different projects that are related to sports science in an very applied way, and I'm essentially a strategic consultant for Sylvan Adams, and as such, I'm basically I've been tasked with trying to build a worldwide network of applied sports science institutes. And it's gained some traction. So we so far have a location in Tel Aviv University that just finished. It's a multi-floor, multi-use facility with full biomechanics, sports physiology, nutrition, body comp laboratories to try and help uplift sports science in Israel, because Sylvan wants Israel to become a sporting nation. He wants to build more because he's made Aliyah to Israel. He lives in Israel. He wants to turn it more into a sporting nation, much like when he was in Canada and supported Mike Woods. He's very philanthropic towards athletics that way. So I've essentially become a consultant to him to help him on these projects, and we're about 73% of the way finished on an institute at McGill, which is where I went to school. And John, you'll see when you go by Pine Avenue, you'll see that it's currently being built in those row houses on Pine, next to the Curry Gym. We're building a Sylvan Adams Sports Science Institute there, and they're going to collaborate with each other. We have one that we're working on the West Coast in Canada. We have another one we're looking at in the UK. We're very close to doing a deal with. We have one we collaborate with in Denmark, another one at Ben Gurion University in the south of Israel. And we're looking at possibly one or two more either in Australia or New Zealand and in the United States. So hopefully we have 8 or so of these in the next few years. We already have 4 in play. And that's essentially what I'm going to be spending some time doing. It's kind of interesting to me because I like going from micro to macro and back. And I like systems and planning and macro dreaming. But I also like the details involved with that. So this particular endeavor allows me to capitalize on my practical experience in the sport and in many different sports, and try to build systems in universities that can help to uplift applied sports science. There is just not enough funding that goes into doing applied sports science research projects. I mean, you know this, John, you apply for grants and funding. I mean, you'll get funded till the cows come home if it's looking at, I don't know, a diabetes research or heart disease or cancer, but there's no one really facilitating answering questions that coaches like me have in the field, physiologists have in the field, athletes have in the field. So I've taken the model of our team and looked at all of the questions that we've had that we want to try to get answered. And we've actually kicked in research projects that help answer them via the institutes, which is great. And all of these will feed into, at least that's the vision now, to one central location in Girona, where it's the mecca of cycling and endurance sports right now in Europe. And we're going to build a satellite location there where all the different profs may feed into to come and do some research project. We're going to have a skunkworks sports engineering laboratory there. We're going to have a metabolic kitchen. We're going to have a full biomech lab, a full physiology lab, even a training gym for high performance athletes. And there's going to be a public piece to that as well. So if you're an executive athlete who's going to come to Girona and want to be tested and treated like an elite athlete, you'll be able to go through that evaluative process, you know. So it's exciting, you know, those pieces are exciting to me because they tie everything together.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds super incredible to be part of that. And, you know, working with Sylvain to make that happen sounds incredible.
You are going to get so many emails after this comes out from graduate students who are like, I want to be a part of that. And absolutely, I moved away from applied sports science or exercise physiology into health research for that exact reason. The writing was on the wall. There's no way I'm going to make a career trying to get grants for this kind of work. You had to be in the field. And so kudos to you. This is a massive gap in exercise science, applied physiology. So
never too late to come and do a few projects, John.
That's right. I just want to end with one story about the Puy de Dôme that you don't know for sure, but the 2 guys that helped crew you for RAM were myself and Kip. And Kip comes out to our cabin every year for a week, and we always watch the tour. And so he goes to bed super early, so he actually missed it. So we kind of replayed in the morning. Then he goes on YouTube, and Mike Woods, or Rusty, is giving an announcement after the race with the champagne. And he says, I want to thank Sully. And Kip and I were more excited to see you there as the coach. And we just couldn't believe it, because in 98, we knew this was your dream. And to see you at the absolute pinnacle, being acknowledged by a Canadian cyclist who just won the stage in the Tour de France, like, we were living, you know, vicariously through your dream, and we were so proud of you, man. Like, we were just going nuts.
That's awesome.
And so,
thank
you.
Saying that.
Yeah, thanks again, because again, another great moment for us. Thanks to you, a little part, you know, and yeah, again, thanks for giving us time today. That was a lot of time, a lot of great stories. Your journey's been amazing. I'm so glad to see you accomplish your dreams in this way, and that the future looks amazing and very bright. So good luck.
My pleasure, guys.
Good luck.
Pleasure to connect.
We look forward to following you in that next journey. So
yeah, thank you so much. This was phenomenal.
Guys.
first off, Steve, in my opinion, as an avid fan of track and field and an avid fan of cycling, Mike Woods is a Canadian icon in both sports. And to have that connection, personal connection that I have with Paulo, who had this personal connection with Mike, is absolutely phenomenal to hear. But then also the stories, the parts of the stories that I hadn't heard before were just mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think when Paulo was talking about that story about the first time with Mike Woods on the motorbike following him, I felt like I was there. You could see how he was talking about it. It was one of those memories that's burned into someone's brain and they feel everything when they recall it. And that's what that was like. And that was such a key moment, but it was just the start of this ridiculous journey that he had with Mike Woods.
And when I knew Paulo in 98 and 99, and he was starting with CompuTrainers, he was bringing the concept of power. We touched a little bit in part 1 on RAM. In RAM, he was using a power meter in 1999. That was unheard of. And as we worked with him, as he was trying to envision power, watts, and where his premier performance studio was going to go, I don't think you ever imagined, well, one day I'm going to be out on the road and I'm going to find this guy who's going to be doing 450 watts and he's going to be breaking records. And then the world comes together in a perfect way. And all of a sudden this beautiful story starts.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful, but also like it's a crazy story because of all the crashes and ups and downs. But it really highlights back to that quote of Paulo, like failures are the doors you have to get through to get to success. And this is just another one of those stories where it's like, wow, like it really gives you a lot of perspective on the, no matter what level of talent you have, the level of determination and the amount of failures you have to get through to get to the top are unbelievable.
And another part of that story that is absolutely fascinating, and I'm somewhat jealous that he's experienced this, is after that ride, he's going back to his premier studio and he's coaching high-level CEOs, masters athletes, and one of them is Sylvan Adams, who ends up being the owner and main sponsor for a world tour team that sponsors many athletes along the way, that helps support athletes at world championships. So these two stories are coming together. I don't think anyone's ever heard this from Paulo's end. So I was super grateful that he made this time for us to tell this side of something that's absolutely epic in Canadian cycling history.
Yeah, thank you to Paulo for those incredible stories and journeys and lessons that we've learned in this podcast. And it was really cool because you, again, as you said, you have this connection, like real connection. Like you worked with him, you crewed when we first met, and you, like within 2 minutes, you said you crewed for Paulo at Race Across America. Like that was just like my mind was blown right at that moment. And to have all this come together this way was just phenomenal.
Yeah, and actually we never made that connection, but when we're watching ABC Wild Wilderness Sports, we know someone who is in three of the four major endurance things that they covered that we were all fascinated with, which is Race Across America, the Tour de France, and Hawaii Ironman.
Yeah.
He's been there for all three.
Yeah, those epic events. He was part of it, athlete and coach, and you were part of one of those events as well. So awesome.
Very cool. So again, Mike, if you are listening and you have your side of the story to tell, we would love to have you on the Long Haul Pedalcast.
Hey Pedalcast fans, you can now reach out to John and Steve through email. Our email is longhaul@umfm.com. longhaul@umfm.com. So you can send us all your questions, all your compliments, and we might get to them on the Pedalcast. So thanks for listening, and reach out to let us know what you're thinking. Thanks for listening to the Long Haul Pedalcast. Be sure to subscribe and keep listening to all of these incredible stories that will help inspire you to create your own long haul journey.